Hi everybody, Debbie Burns here. Week 5 of quarantine and pants with no buttons for 5 weeks in a row, not a good thing. I'm here to read to you today for Romance Author StoryTime. I'm going to read an excerpt of Over Paws, the 5th Rescue Me book that comes out Tuesday, April 28th, so it's almost here. And in this Rescue Me story, it's the 5th book. Gabe and Olivia are on their way in rural Missouri to rescue a dog that is trapped in a doghouse in a flood, trapped in a dog pen in a flood and can't get out. Here we go. They spotted the Camaro at the same time. The house that it was parked in front of was in the shabbiest condition of any house on the road, close to condemnable even from what Olivia could see through the remains of last year's overgrowth of trees and shrubs pressing up against it. Certainly the partially collapsed front porch was a hazard. The back of the property dipped in such a way that it seemed unlikely the house wouldn't take on water before the river crested tomorrow. If we're too late. Olivia swallowed back the rest. They weren't too late. They were right on time. It couldn't be any other way. Gabe's tires skidded to a halt on the wet gravel driveway. Stay put, bud, he directed Samson. Proving again the almost human-like connection between them, Samson responded with a soft whine and settled back onto the bench seat. The teens who'd spotted the dog were nowhere in sight. I'm guessing they were around back. Olivia grabbed her jacket and the bolt cutters and hopped out into the rain. The soft gurgle of rushing water made the hair on the back of her neck and arms stand on end as she tugged into a jacket that was nearly as wet inside now as it was outside. Most likely. Leaving the keys in the ignition, Gabe jogged around to the back of the truck. He popped open the back of his camper and crawled in. In the space of a minute, he emerged with a tightly wound rope over his shoulder, a set of gloves shoved into his back pocket, an axe, and a jumbled mass of nylon that looked like a set of shoulder straps without the attached backpack in one hand. As they headed along the side of the house together, his free hand locked around her elbow. Look, I don't want to come off sounding like a macho prick, but there's no trusting floodwater, not the current, not what it carries. So what I'm saying is if I don't like the look of things, I'm going to ask you to hang back. I'd appreciate it if you'd trust me, but I don't want to have to choose between saving a dog and saving you. Electricity raced up her arm at the gentle strength in his grip. His words struck a chord. She was a good swimmer, but she'd never swum in a current before. Okay, you say it like you have experience in floodwater. Technically, I do. 10 hours of water rescue training and 1 real-time rescue. Olivia started to ask him to clarify what she meant, but they'd rounded the corner of the house and her heart lurched into her throat. 100 or so feet out in the rushing, choppy water, there was a dog pen attached to a small, rotted shed. From the creaks and groans emanating from it, the shed was on the verge of collapsing from the pressure of the water rushing into and past it. Inside the pen, a large, liver-brown and spotted white hound balanced precariously atop a nearly submerged doghouse that must have been swept by the pressure of the water into the far corner. He was standing on all fours, his gangly legs balancing on the half-hexagon roof, his tail tucked slightly between his legs, and his head bowed low. Even as far away as she was, Olivia could spot drops of water streaming off him. He either hadn't been up there long or he was having trouble keeping his balance and was getting knocked off. The 2 teenagers were behind the house at the edge of the advancing water. One of them, a girl who looked as if she might blow away at a heavy wind, was crying. The guy with her wasn't much bigger. He had his phone out and was filming. You 2 placed the call? Gabe directed the question their way. The girl startled, not having heard them approach over the eerie groan of the rushing water and creaking trees. The teens hurried their way, the girl sweeping at her cheeks and the guy putting away his phone. As they got closer, Olivia realized the guy was soaked to the bone, cropped black hair and all. The girl only seemed wet from the waist down. Robbie tried to go in after the dog, the girl said. Her voice was shaky and uneven, but the water gets really strong about 10 feet in. It isn't that deep, but I thought he was going to get swept away. It's a good thing you turned around, Gabe said. Water moving this fast has undercurrents, and you never know when you're going to step into a strong one. The dog let out a giant bay that stabbed straight into Olivia's heart. She clamped her hands together and scoped out the path to the pen. The unflooded strip of yard between the house and the water seemed to fall in a steady decline, and out in the rushing water, there were areas with more ripples than others. With any luck, it was only 3 or so feet deep, but Gabe was right. There was no denying it was moving fast. Did you guys bring a boat, or are you going to try to walk it? There's no boat. Gabe's free hand locked around Olivia's arm for a second or two. Would you want to stay back and hold the rope for me? I think we could use that tree as a pivot joint. Olivia frowned. If she went in and the water knocked her off her feet, 4 years of high school swim team might enable her to reach the pen, but there'd be no carrying out a dog that size through the water. She was willing to bet he was 70 or 80 pounds. Pushing through the water while holding a gangly, heavy dog would be a challenge even for Gabe. And he probably had half a foot of height and 50 pounds on her. It was Olivia's turn to squeeze Gabe's arm, and even in the stress of the moment, some instinctive part of her responded to the solid feel of his biceps. Just promise not to get into anything you can't handle. I'll do my best. He pulled out the gloves, tucked into his back pocket, and offered them to her along with the rope. You'll need the gloves to hold the rope if I end up fighting that water. To the teens, he added, back her up, will you guys? The dog let out a series of long bays. To Olivia's horror, she realized the water was close to tipping the doghouse over right underneath him. It was knocking back and forth against the metal fence of the pen from the pressure of the water. Dogs can swim, Olivia told herself over and over. They're great swimmers. Even if it tips, he'll be fine till Gabe reaches him. Olivia tugged on the several sizes too big gloves as Gabe treaded one end of the long rope through the belt loop of his jeans. His cotton shirt was lifted in the process, exposing an inch or two of remarkably defined obliques and a pronounced V disappearing into his jeans and sending a wash of saliva over the back of her mouth. When finished, Gabe hooked the backpack-looking strap over his shoulders. Just before he tugged, a red-handled pull poking out from its left tip, Olivia realized it was a self-inflating life jacket, just a much slimmer one than the bulky styrofoam-filled floaties she'd worn strapped around her on float trips as a kid. He checked his pockets and his eyebrows furrowed together. Guess my phone's in the truck, keys too. For sure your keys are, I saw them. Before she realized she was doing it, she leaned forward and pressed a kiss onto his cheek. Be safe. Certain her face betrayed the easygoing manner she hoped to portray, she flushed tomato red. She could feel the heat of it lighting her skin. She hadn't realized till now how good he smelled, the subtle but enticing, the scent warring with the earthy smell of the floodwater. His hazel green eyes locked on hers for a single second. Then he turned and took off down the yard, leaving Olivia to unwind the rope and pivot it around the relatively young but sturdy-looking tree not far out of the water. Water's damn cold for March, Gabe said when he was a few feet in. The brown water parted around his legs, rippling in a heart-shaped wave and forming soft bubbles against his jeans. A large, floating branch struck the shed with a solid whack, bounced against it for a few seconds, then was swept away by the floodwater. Olivia hoped the metal fence of the pen was concreted into the ground. Maybe it was because it was an open mesh fence rather than a solid wood surface, but at that moment it seemed to be more stable than the shed it was attached to. She wanted to keep watching, but Gabe was pushing through the water fast enough that she needed to focus on unwinding the rope and providing him with the right amount of slack. Just over her shoulder, the girl was mumbling, "Oh God, what if the water sweeps him away?" more to herself than to her boyfriend or to Olivia. The tension mounting inside Olivia quadrupled on hearing the girl's express fear. She blurted out the first question that came to mind in hopes of suppressing it. "Do you two know who lives here?" "No idea," the boy spat out. "We just wanted to check out the flooding. We spotted the dog on our way back. We were down the road away. It's a trip, man. The river access, the whole parking lot is swallowed up by water." He pulled out his phone and started filming again. "I kind of get the feeling nobody lives here," the girl added. She dropped her voice and shot a glance back toward the house. "The front yard already looks like a flood ripped through here." Olivia was inclined to agree with her. A glance at Gabe showed he was 15 or 20 feet in, and the water was already over his knees. He still had a long way to go before he reached the dog. As a rush of fear pressed over her, all Olivia could think to do was pray harder than she'd prayed in a long time. Well, that's the excerpt of Head Over Paws. If you want to know if they save the dog, we know he saves the dog. This is available April 28th, bookstores everywhere, and ebook as well if you're not able to get out. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. I'll be hanging around to answer them. Thanks everyone, and stay healthy and safe. Bye.